Now that the Patriots schedule is out, when should they start Drake Maye? We'll tell you here on PatsCast. Welcome to PatsCast. I'm Brad Whitaker. A couple days ago, I broke down the Patriots 2024 schedule. Check out the last podcast if you want to hear the predictions, places you might want to visit if you want to go to a road game, have all that information there. But today I'm going to go through the schedule again, but this time talk about when might be an ideal time to start Drake Maye. Now, I'll preface it with Drake Maye saying it's going to be a quarterback competition. If this is similar to Mac Jones' rookie year, where he was clearly the better quarterback compared to Cam Newton in training camp, like, he'll be starting week one. He'll be the starting quarterback for the future. But let's assume that's not the case. We know Drake Maye has a lot to overcome in terms of his footwork, his throwing motion, that little hitch that we talked about last week with his throw. Got to get Tom House in there to fix that thing. And just learning an NFL offense, playing under center, like, I give it maybe a 15 to 20% chance that Drake Maye is the starter week one. So let's assume that's not going to happen and go through the schedule here. I'll get the graphic on the screen right now. I'm just going to skip over the first 4 weeks, right? Like, not starting week one in this scenario. He's not going to start week two unless Jacoby Brissett gets hurt. So that won't happen. You're not sending him out on Thursday Night Football against the New York Jets, their first home game of the season. Aaron Rodgers, really his first home game in a Jets uniform, because I'm not counting the one where he got hurt last year in week one. And then you're not going to throw him to the Wolves week 4 on the road at San Francisco against a real Super Bowl contender. That's not going to happen either. So I think the only realistic game where Drake Maye may start is week 5 at home against the Miami Dolphins. The only reason I would see this happening in that game is if the Patriots start the season and they're 0-4 or 1-3, which is a real possibility, right? Like, as far as I've seen, they're the underdogs in all 17 games, according to the Vegas odds. So they could go 0-17. I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think they're going to be a 7 or 8 win team when all is said and done. But opening against the Bengals, probably a loss. At home against the Seahawks, that's a game I think they can win. So let's just chalk that up as a win. But then Jets in New York, Niners in San Francisco. 1-3 is a very high probability, and there's also a great chance it's 0-4. And if that's the case, Jacoby Brissett has underperformed. The defense isn't really keeping them in these games like we think they might, even if they have another poor offense. Then you explore the possibility, right? Like, all right, Maye's been improving in practice. He's been doing well. Maybe we want to start him at home. He's got 2 straight games against the Dolphins, against the Texans. Now, those are some good defenses. So, even in this scenario, I don't really see that happening in week 6 or week 5 against the Dolphins and the Texans. So, another idea, you send him out to London and you have him start that game. Maybe he's going up against Mac Jones, which would be really fun. Trevor Lawrence goes down. You give him a week to prepare, has all the camaraderie with his teammates touring London. I don't think that's going to happen either, though, in all honesty, because that's a tough week to prepare. You know, there's a lot of media stuff. There's a lot of distractions when you go overseas. I just don't see it happening. So maybe the following week at home against the New York Jets, but then you're going up against that Jets pass rush. So that's probably not going to happen. Now, a game that I am eyeing, even though it's on the road, and you don't really want him to open on the road 2 games in a row, but let's say the Patriots are 1-7 or 2-6, which is a real possibility by the time they get to week 9. Tennessee Titans could be good. They had a good offseason, but they could also be a terrible team. They only got, I think, 1 or 2 primetime games, similar to the Patriots this year. So the NFL doesn't expect the Titans to be a good team. Maybe that is the game that you start him on the road, and then you have him go to Chicago, who probably will be a good team with adding Caleb Williams and that really incredible offense that they have. They have a good defense, good O-line, probably the best receiving core in the league. So that may be a tough one as well. So I wouldn't expect that to be his first game, but I could see week 9 at Tennessee, and then he's had the reps, and you're ready to throw him out in week 10 against Chicago. But maybe that doesn't work. So let's say the Patriots at this point, they're through week 10, they're 2-8, they're 3-7, something like that. I do think the LA Rams, at least defensively, this is not the team that won the Super Bowl a few years ago. They lost Aaron Donald, he retired. So maybe that's a game you start him. Rams have to travel across the country, play in a cold weather city in mid-November. That's a possibility. If not, you're not going to start him in Miami the following week, even though it's a late November game against the Dolphins. It's still a tough time going to Miami because you're practicing in the cold, and then you have to go down there, and it still might be 80, 85 degrees. I don't see that happening. So really the games that I think are most realistic is Jacoby Brissett looks awful. They're going to start him week 5 against Miami. If that's not going to happen, then I think the next ideal scenario is week 9 on the road at Tennessee. If that's not the case, I think the game you start him, and I think this makes the most sense. Let's say the Patriots, clearly not a playoff team this year. They're just not clicking. They have 5 games left and a bye week after the first one. I think this is the time where you want to start Drake Maye, and that would be week 13, December 1st, against the Indianapolis Colts. A game that I think is very winnable regardless who is at quarterback. I think that makes a lot of sense because you have Drake Maye go out there. Maybe they win, maybe they don't, who knows. But then you got a bye week and 2 weeks to prepare for their game on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. So then Drake Maye can look at the film, clean everything up, and then he's ready to go back out there in week 15 on the road against Arizona. And look, he's a guy who's putting in the work. 21 years old, could learn very quickly. You give him a couple weeks after his NFL debut as a starter, then maybe he cleans things up even more and looks pretty good by week 15. And then you have 4 games the rest of the season for him to really get those NFL reps in and be prepared to be the starter heading into year 2. I would say this is probably the best case scenario. You start him week 13, give him the bye, and let him finish out the last 4 games of the season so he gets 5 games as the starter. Now, they don't start him week 13. They go through the bye. I don't think you start him on the road back-to-back against the Arizona Cardinals or the Buffalo Bills. So then you get into kind of a Patrick Mahomes situation who started the last game of his rookie season, spent 16 games, or I think it was 15 games because they had one less game then. Learning behind Alex Smith, and then he starts the last game of the season. I say you do something similar, but you do it for the last 2 games of the season. You start Drake Maye week 17 against the Chargers, and then week 18 against the Bills. Both games are at home. Both good opportunities for him to get the reps in and head into his second season, knowing what it's like to be a starter in the NFL, and then hopefully he makes the so-called sophomore leap and can start then. So here's the thing, though. If the Patriots are good, if they're a playoff team or at least a playoff contender, and they don't start Drake Maye at the beginning of the season, and they're heading into the final week or 2 of the season, you're not going to start him at all, right? You're going to ride out Jacoby Brissett for the rest of the season, hope that you can make the playoffs, and then we won't see Drake Maye until year 2. So these scenarios are really only possible if the Patriots are once again a 4, 5, 6 win team. Which I think is a real possibility because they have the second toughest strength of schedule in the entire NFL. So I would say if that's the case, the Patriots aren't very good, which is a high probability. Best case scenarios, you start him week 13 against the Indianapolis Colts. Let him finish out the last 5 games of the season. Garbage games. Let him get the reps in, and then he goes into year 2 looking pretty ready. Or you wait. If let's say you're still kind of in the race heading into the last 3 weeks of the season, and then you're out of it the last 2 home games of the season, then you start him those games. I think that makes the most sense, but going to be interesting to see what he does in training camp. Let me know in the comments below, looking at this schedule, what are the games that you think would be best to start Drake Maye? Do you want him out there early, even if the Patriots are good or bad? Do you say, look, we'll ride the first 4 weeks with Brissett, and then we'll put Maye out there? Let me know. I'm curious to hear from you. We'll be back next week with more Patriots coverage. Be sure to like this video if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe there as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'll be back next week.
Here we